Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Kyle Miller Show. I'm your host. I'm here to share with you insights of people's stories, extraordinary people that are doing great things in the community, with their lives, in their businesses, and that's why I'm here. I'm here to share those stories with you today. I'm excited with the guest that we have today. His name's Paul McArtor. Thank you for joining us, Paul.
Oh, thank you.
You're a husband, a father, a veteran, business owner, realtor, and Buccaneers fan.
Buccaneers fan, you gotta love it. Been a couple good years.
Thanks for coming on. I'm excited. I'm always intrigued because of your veteran, right? Of being a veteran. You're in the Air Force. My father was in the Air Force. I was in the National Guard. So I always look forward to hearing stories like this and hearing about your career and then the transition from your career to where you're at today and the steps that you took. So obviously, you were part of the military, you fought for our country, you put in your time, you supported everybody here. I'd love to hear a little bit about that and then the transition into where you're at today, man.
All right. So, like you said, I was in the Air Force. That's actually how I got to Charlottesville. Charlottesville was my last duty assignment. When we came here, the plan was to be in Charlottesville for 3 years and then move on to whatever the next assignment was going to be after that. Had never even heard of Charlottesville before coming. In fact, I thought I was coming to Charlotte. And then once I found out that it was Charlottesville, we started asking around, and everybody raved about this place that we were coming to.
Right.
Funny story. When we knew I was getting my assignment, I asked my wife Jen, okay, what's the one? Where do you want to go? What's your one thing you want? And she said, the only thing I care about is I want to go to a bigger base than we're at now, which we were at a small base in Massachusetts. The Air Force, she gave the Air Force one way to disappoint her. We came where there's no base whatsoever. So we came here to Charlottesville. This was in 2013. So they were starting to do a lot of the drawdowns and stuff. So 6 months after I was here, they offered early retirement. I enjoyed my time in the military, but I was also ready to move on.
Yeah.
So I took advantage of that early retirement. So surprisingly, after being here 6 months, I was on my way out. Had to figure out what on earth I was going to do next, especially since it was about 3.5 years earlier than what I was thinking.
Right.
I was going to get out.
Right.
So it didn't take very long for us to realize we wanted to settle here in Charlottesville. We loved it instantly when we got here. I had always done real estate as a hobby. Investment properties, had flipped a couple houses, just some speculation stuff. So I always enjoyed that, and I always enjoyed helping people that were thinking about it, like just friends of mine, helping them either kind of decide if they wanted to buy or get rental properties or that kind of stuff. So it naturally seemed like, okay, I'm going to do something with real estate. And while I was trying to figure out what it was, I said, well, I'll be a realtor until I figure out something else.
Now, you went to the Air Force straight out of high school?
So I went into the Air Force about 2 years after high school. I didn't do college.
Okay.
I got out, tried to did construction for a little while,
and
realized I needed to do something.
Yep.
And then joined the Air Force. Did all my college while I was in. So I was able to get an associate's, bachelor's, and master's all while I was in.
Okay.
Started off enlisted. About 4 years in, I switched and got commissioned. So I ended up retiring as a major.
Nice.
Yeah. So I say joining the Air Force was the best thing I ever did.
Yep.
Retiring from the Air Force was the second best thing that I ever did, from a career-wise.
No, I totally get it. So when you were doing the drawdown and you were getting ready to come out, I mean, what were some of the thoughts, some of the things that were going through your head at that point?
So probably now everybody has a different story. For me, by the time they offered the early retirement, that was the third round of cuts. And I had survived the first two.
Right.
And it was just it's kind of in a way getting a little annoying.
Right.
The other ones were a little bit earlier in my career, so I would have been just basically cut or just given like a small severance. So the early retirement, I had gotten to the point where I was staying in the military basically to retire. Once you cross that magical 10-year point, every year after that, it gets harder and harder to like walk away from a retirement when you're 5 years away, 4 years away. So in a way, it was a win-win because they offered what I was waiting for. So I was happy to get out.
Gotcha.
But it was still, even with that, it's still quite a transition. I was in if you want to kind of look at the spectrum of the military the people who are knocking down doors and clearing buildings, combat kind of arms, all the way to the stretch of the other side that's as close to civilian life as you can get. I was probably on that closer to civilian life. I did program management, so I worked with a lot of like defense contractors, new systems development, stuff like that.
Gotcha.
So you would think that would be an easy transition, and maybe in some ways it was easier, but even then it was still kind of a lot of small things that you don't think about. Like another one that my wife gave me a hard time about, I had been out of the military for probably like 2 years, and I mentioned something medical. I forget what it was, and she's like, well, when you go to your next annual appointment, your doctor's appointment, you should talk about that. And I was like, how does that happen?
Right.
And she's like, what do you mean? I was like, nobody's ever like called me to set up an annual appointment. And she said, that's not how it works.
Right.
Like, like the same thing happened with flu. I went the first 3 years, I didn't get a flu shot.
Right.
Because I was used to getting like an email that basically says, come down to the lobby and get your flu shot.
Yeah.
And they line you all up and boom, 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 they give you all a flu shot.
Right.
So there was a lot of kind of really small things like that you don't think about.
Yeah.
Until you get out and you're in the, quote unquote real world and you realize these are things that people have,
they have to do themselves.
These are things that people learned when they were like, 20 years old.
Yeah. I look at it, right? And you look at in the military, it's just a huge corporate structure. That's pretty much it, right?
Yeah.
But their product is
killing people.
Yeah. So
killing people and breaking things.
Yeah,
that's what a lot of people say.
And so you look at that, but then you're married to it, right? And you have your contract with them, and you're within the rules. You're not within the normal rules. You're within military code. And then you have, and they basically tell you, hey, go eat, go do this. Yep. Here's your schedule. Boom, it's all laid out. And for somebody who's used to that, I'm sure getting out of that. And you're a major, so probably a little easier transition. There's a lot of different things, but if somebody who's, and more on the enlisted side, maybe that's only been there 6-7 years, and then getting out of that and not having that retirement, I'm sure that could be really scary for them.
Well, the retirement definitely, the retirement, the healthcare that comes with retirement, all that was obviously made the transition way easier.
Right.
I think I mentioned earlier before the show started, I talked to some other like veteran-owned businesses and stuff like that, and a lot of those guys are, just a few years in, then they've gotten out. Well, Jerry, one of the guys that's on the shows here a lot, David Trichy, that's that owns Skooma. Like he's a veteran.
Yeah,
and I may have it wrong. I think he served 4 years, 6 years, something like that. I might have that wrong a little bit. So you do see this whole kind of range from people who have been like career. That aren't going anywhere close to home. Then you've got people who, serve 2, 3, 4 years, then they head right back home where they're from.
Right.
So it's an interesting. There's a spread.
Yeah. So you get out of the military. You're interested in the real estate. You're helping people with that, and then you become a realtor. Is that the next step?
Yeah. So
that you did?
Before I even got fully out, I did. I went through. Got my real estate license, went through the whole, go through the class,
for this.
All that. Well, 6 months in, I put in for the early retirement. From the time that I showed up to Charlottesville to the time I was out of the military was about a year. So I had about 6 months to where I knew I was going to be getting out and was able to do that transition.
Yeah.
I went, got my real estate license. I was still actually in the military when I started practicing real estate. I was in that transition, so I could have a few days off every week. So I would basically go in and do my military stuff, Monday, Tuesday. And by military stuff, it was really just getting ready for retirement.
Yeah.
Because it takes a while to go through all the stuff that you have to retire. And then I would do real estate, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Right.
And then I'd start it over again.
Back at it.
Yeah, and it was funny when we talk about like the obstacles of transitioning that people don't think about. When I signed on with the first brokerage I was in, I was going through training. The first thing they said is, you need to tell everybody you know in town that you're doing real estate.
Yeah.
And I was like, fantastic. That was 4 people.
Right.
Yeah, that's all I knew. I mean, because especially I worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency, which is here in Charlottesville. Everybody knows NJEC.
Yeah.
DIA is on the same campus. Well, you're working classified programs and stuff like that. You don't know everybody in the building because you really only work and talk to the 5-6 people that are like working your particular stuff that you can talk about.
Yeah.
So even though the building had, however many thousands of people in it, I knew 6. In fact, when I first started real estate, if you asked me to name everything where I knew it was in Charlottesville, I knew where my house was, I knew where DIA was, I knew where Lowe's and Chick-fil-A was.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
I didn't know Crozet. I couldn't have told you where Crozet was.
Right.
I kind of knew Greene County because there were people that I worked with that turned right out of NJEC, then left. But it was really funny. It was a struggle because a lot of people I think get into real estate because they're familiar with the area, they grew up here, they knew, and then they got to learn real estate. Right. And I felt like I knew real estate, but I needed to learn Charlottesville.
Right.
Yeah. So that was an extra little.
And so I was a realtor a while ago, right? Yep. And Realtor, I know one of my friends is going to get really upset with me.
Oh, God. Oh, yeah.
So she's like, Realtor.
Don't pronounce that
like,
I.
All right,
yeah, that doesn't exist.
So, but I got rid of my license a couple years ago, but I've been in real estate since 2009 here in Charlottesville. And I've bought, sold houses to people, that whole thing. I've done it all. And being a realtor was not really my thing. For me, it was, well, one, you're on all the time. And coming in through 2009, 2010 is whenever I was doing it. And I was young. I was 20, 23, 24, something like that. And getting people to like work with me at that point. I wasn't, I guess, as skilled as others. I mean, I did still do some transactions. But I would see these deals. And I would be like, man, you got to buy this deal. This thing is like, it's a great deal. You got $60,000 worth of equity built in right now. And all you got to do is, paint the walls, do a little this, do a little that, and you're good to go. And I just got tired of doing it. And so I said, screw this. I'm buying my own things. And so that's when I turned into an investor and started buying my own houses.
And it's interesting that you say that because I kind of have almost in a way did the reverse. So I have some investment property stuff, still have some down in Georgia where I lived a few assignments ago. I have people ask me all the time why I don't have investment properties here in Charlottesville. And I tell them I have some investors that I work with that are always asking me to find them things. And I always feel like if it's a good investment, I have realtors I have investors who are counting on me to bring them deals. It would be really kind of unethical in my own head for me to do the deal.
Right.
So if I see something that's what I think is a good investment, I pass it amongst the few investors I work with, and then none of them take it. Well, then I wouldn't feel so bad, but then I'm wondering what I'm missing. Right?
Yeah.
Because why do I think this is a good deal and like these other 4 people passed it?
Right.
But that's like I said, I get a lot of people that ask like, hey, you see all this, why don't you have rental properties here? Why don't you have investments? Why aren't you doing flips? And I feel like I have clients that, hire me to find them those.
Right.
So it's interesting that you did that same, because I can completely see how you do that off ramp.
Right. I just,
You know?
I got tired of the 9 p.m. phone calls. Yeah, I traded 9 p.m. phone calls from clients to contractors. So
Yeah.
it is what it is. But I always felt like I was trying to help somebody get something, and it just, to me, it just didn't mesh. I liked,
Yeah.
the biggest thing for me is also home inspections. I don't know about you, but with home inspections that I see some of the craziest things in home inspections, and people asking for ungodly things.
Oh, yeah.
And I know that houses, look, if anybody's ever out listening right now, learn this one thing: anything can be fixed with money.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and especially other people's money.
Yeah, there's not a problem out there that cannot be fixed. And when I see people walk away from things or get so uptight, and there's like this emotional charge to it, it baffles me.
And you know what's funny about that? I was having this conversation. We have some new agents in our office, and I was having this conversation with them. I have seen more $1 million deals fall apart over $1,500 over like a $1,500 repair, because there's egos involved.
Yeah.
The seller's refusing to do it. The buyer's refusing to buy, and you have this deal that you would think that would not even register in the equation.
Right.
And then you see houses that, are a $300,000 house, and people, both buyer and seller, are doing everything they can to make it work.
Yeah.
So that's a dynamic that I've always seen that I thought was really interesting. But it is, you can see both buyers and sellers. And this is one thing I really like about real estate. You can see people totally approach problems from different angles.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't even know why they're going the direction they are.
Right.
And you have to work and try to bring them around, because as a realtor, your job is to obviously get your client what they want. Mm-hmm. But sometimes your job is like protect your buyer or seller from making a bad decision.
Right.
Like you're almost protecting them from themselves sometimes.
Yeah.
To where, they're ready to throw this deal away because, they'll just sell it to the next person. And you have to explain, there's some ramifications. You go back on the market, now you have a red flag, all that. Or vice versa, you're able to, you got a buyer ready to walk away. And it's like, there's not a lot of houses out here. It's probably better for us to make this one work.
Right. And that's the conundrum that I have. Whenever I'm dealing, because I deal with it a lot. I've sold over 400 houses of me owning the house and dealing with the buyer on that side. And I typically just try to just take care of everything, because I don't want to have anything come back to me.
Well, and that's another. I've actually helped a buyers buy one of yours before.
Yeah.
It's the first time we interacted. There's such a wide spectrum of flippers, for like, we'll use that word because that's what everybody understands. To where you've got people who flip houses that do a fantastic job.
Yeah.
They're completely above board. They do a good job. They fix problems. And then you have some, and you get to know them.
Right.
You have some that you walk in and it's a complete disaster, and you can tell that they absolutely knew what they were doing when they patched that hole and covered that.
Right.
And that's one of the things that when I look at a thing and I see that it's an investor selling the house or something like that, it's always like, okay, what are we walking into?
Right.
Is it somebody who's trying to hide and we're trying to find the stuff that they're hiding?
Right.
Or is it one that we can have some confidence that
either
they fix the problems, or if we find something, they're going to fix the problem?
And that's the thing. Some people think that, like, when we do these flips and we flip these houses, that, we got contractors in there, in and out, and we're trying to manage everything. Did this get done? Did this get done? We have our processes and checks and stuff, but still things miss.
Yep.
And then here's the other thing. 90% of the time I throw a home inspector in and look at my houses before I throw it on the market, so I know what are the items that are coming, and I fix those things, because I know if these little things that we missed, right? And it could be, hey, the electrician, when he put the thing in, it popped off the back. great. Easy fix. But it's those little things that get in the back of the mind of the buyers that, well, these guys are cutting corners. And, I tell all my contractors, listen, I don't know electrical. I'm not an electrician.
Yeah.
I'm not a plumber. I said, listen, my goal is to make this home safe and functional, right? Does it have to be DIY all the time? No. Not DIY, but like Pinterest model.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be that way all the time. Does it have to be, $1 million house? No, because this market doesn't handle a $1 million house.
Yeah.
Let's make sure when we put this thing on the market that the buyer is going to have a safe house where they can live.
Well, and a friend of mine, they do flips and stuff like that, and their goal, which I really appreciate, their goal is to try to have an affordable house.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you do see these people who are, flipping a property in Belmont, and they're trying to make that, this 3-bedroom, 1-bath house, and they want to be able to sell it for, $600,000 because it's just got all the bells and whistles and gold plated this and that.
Right.
A lot of people don't understand when we talk about affordable housing, we talk about all that, like the investors and the flippers who are taking that rundown house and just kind of bringing it up to nice standards,
right,
but not crazy over the top,
right,
are a very, very important component to like delivering affordable housing onto the market.
Yeah.
And everybody thinks everybody's getting rich. I don't know a single investor who's ever gotten rich off of one deal.
No.
Right? It's just, they're just not that.
And they're making $30,000 on this house. They spent 6 months on it.
Yeah. Well, and it's also, it's the HGTV thing, right? People are like, I get it when people call me and they're like, hey, I want to buy a house. I'm like, okay, well, what are you looking for? I want to be able to buy something for about $100,000 and then be able to flip it and sell it for like $5,000. That doesn't like that.
You
doesn't
get those calls?
That doesn't exist. Oh yeah. I will say I haven't gotten very many lately.
Right.
But it's because they see on HGTV somebody flip a 3-bedroom, 2-bath and they make $60,000, and it's like, yeah, but that was in California or Toronto.
Right.
Like you see a rundown 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and it's $250,000 because it needs a bunch of work. When you have that fit, it's not a $500,000 house. It's still a 3-bedroom, 2-bath kind of thing. Depending on where it's at.
I think the biggest profit I made on a single house flip was like $150,000. But it's in Charlottesville. It was a 2-year process. We had to take down a house. We had to deal with asbestos. And then we had to rebuild a new one. It was 2 years. We made $150,000, but it was every day.
Yeah.
Something's going on. We got a schedule. We got to do this.
And
I had a partner.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things, and you see this with business in general, not just flipping houses. People don't value risk, right?
Yeah,
People don't value the homeowner or the flipper, the business person, the entrepreneur. People don't value risk when they do stuff. They think everything's money. They see somebody successfully running a store or a restaurant or some other business, and they don't realize that if that business fails, they lose their house, right? Because they've mortgaged their house to be able to do this business.
Yeah.
Or they're poor. Like
right.
I just talking to a friend today that had kind of gone down a new business enterprise, and it just didn't work. Not because they were bad. It just most small businesses fail.
Right.
And they probably lost $60,000 over the course of last year, and people ignore that because they see the success and they're like, they're not doing anything, but their employees are doing all the work and they're just making money. Well,
right.
It's there because they did something.
Well, let's talk about this. Let's talk about hidden costs of things, right? You're doing a development right now.
Yeah.
Right? You bought this piece of land, right?
Yep. Bought this piece of land with the idea that I was going to build some affordable, not affordable by the definition of whatever that you can't possibly do, but affordable, like moderate priced apartments is what I wanted to do. 32 of them.
Right.
Be able to provide 32 good entry level apartments for people to live in.
Right.
And now it's going to be 8 $500,000 townhomes.
$500,000
Good
townhouse.
job with affordable housing.
Right.
We just
Right. Yeah.
like
we wanted this plan, but
and I've seen that, and just so I've seen that in, you can talk to a lot of developers. Again, everybody thinks every developer's after the money. Like there's projects that you can see where people are trying to do the right thing, and they just can't.
Well, why? Right?
So a bunch of reasons. So I'll use my project that's very early in development. It hasn't even gone to the board of planning commission. So hopefully I'm not shooting myself in the foot with these conversations. First you got zoning and you got density. So we all have heard on the news about the upzoning and stuff in Charlottesville.
Right.
I'm going to take a step back, get on my soapbox a little bit. The biggest flaw that people have when they start talking about affordable housing is the biggest flaw in almost every conversation I have. You cannot make an expensive house affordable.
Right.
Right? It's not possible to do it. So anytime I see a program that's goal is to make an expensive house affordable, I hate it. It's a waste of taxpayer money. So examples of what I mean by that. Down payment assistance programs. I'm not saying that it's not helpful to the person buying. It's an awful way to try to do affordable housing because you make an expensive house affordable for the first buyer, and then when they sell it, it's an expensive house again.
Right.
Right. So that money got thrown in there for basically the benefit of one person.
Right.
Who cashed out, which that's why people buy houses so they can cash out.
Right.
So the only way to really make affordable housing is to be able to make smaller, cheaper, more dense housing.
Right.
Like that. It's not rocket science. That's
Right.
what we need to be able to do. So when you have somebody trying to do a project like mine and the zoning for some reason that can't be explained with any common sense, the zoning just stops at my property line, and my property is a lower density than the property next.
Right.
With no actual reasonable reason for that. So, that all of a sudden took me down from being able to do 32 to having to shrink way down.
Right.
And then other things that get put in that I like to say are rich people problems, right? So my property is going to be on in between two roads that are considered entrance corridors. That it has to be pretty, and according to the architectural review board, they're going to have requirements. Now I haven't met with them, so I'm not going to throw them under the bus yet because I don't know exactly what those requirements are going to be. But there's going to be additional requirements because they want it to look nice because it's the entrance corridor into Charlottesville.
Right.
Well, everything that's nice costs money.
Yep.
So instead of having a nice basic backyard,
Right.
I'm going to have something that makes it look like the front of the house on both sides.
Right.
Well, the front of the house is more expensive than the back of the house.
Right.
Right? That's where you put your stone and your finishes and all that kind of stuff. Another great example. So I'm looking at building 8 units. So everything that I talk about has to be divided among 8.
Right.
Well, they're insisting that I build a playground. Okay. Well, so a commercial playground, $30,000.
Right.
Okay, $30,000 divided by 8 units. We're looking at somewhere between $7,000 to $8,000 that's going to be spent. Well, the calculations, according to the count, is I'm going to have 2 kids live there, right? I mean, I'll affordable, fair housing. Anybody can live there.
Right.
But their calculation when it comes to school and stuff is the projection is there'll be 2 kids.
Right.
Well, every one of those houses has to be $7,000 more expensive
Because of that.
for this. And then you look at it and if you go up and down the area where I'm building this, there's 4 or 5 different neighbors in there. All of them have the same little playground.
Yeah.
Good Lord, just build a park.
Right.
That's going to be better.
Right.
Instead of us all having the same little playground that has the same 3 swings, 1 slide, monkey bars. Have a park that has, maybe some basketball courts and some other gathering places that kids can go to. That's something there. But now all of a sudden I'm going to have green space that's community space. I'm going to have this playground. Well, that means I have to have an HOA.
Right.
Right? It'd be much easier to just divide this property up and just like, but now I have to have this HOA. HOA is going to have to cover, the lawn care. I'm probably not going to be able to have a public street. So it's going to have to pay to plow the street, do all this other stuff. Again, dividing that by 8 units.
And a road, I don't know if anybody realizes how expensive a road is. Like a couple years ago, I was looking at it. It was $200 a foot.
Yeah.
A linear foot, right?
Yeah.
And so how long are these driveways? 800, 1,000, or 1,000 foot? Like that's not a long road, 1,000 feet.
Yeah, and that's the thing is when you have people that are already living in houses, dictating what other houses should be, right? They ignore the fact that people have to pay for this thing. So like an HOA of $100 a month. I'm not a mortgage guy, but your calculation, that's probably the equivalent of spending an extra $20,000 on a house.
Yeah.
So that's not free.
Yeah.
But from like when I talk to a lot of the people in government or have been, or just that are speaking out against things, like when that playground is built, it impacts the price of the house.
Right.
And they don't really, that seems to be lost on a lot of people.
Well, here's what I think, Paul. I don't understand why they don't allow trailer parks anymore. And this is, I've seen, I do this, I look at all the counties because I buy land and I do all this stuff in all these counties. They don't allow trailer parks anymore. That's really where your affordable housing would come from. Now, you can cut it up and put one trailer on a 3-acre parcel, but my grandmother, she lived in Pennsylvania. A few years ago, she moved down here, but she lived in a nice park. Like the grass was like, it was like competition. If like one neighbor went out and cut the grass, like the whole neighborhood cut grass. There was like, it was a nice paved driveway, concrete driveways into their house, but a paved road that went around.
I grew up in Florida, also lived in Alabama before I joined the military. There are some really nice places that are trailers, and I get it. Yeah, we find there's the rundown trailer parks that are
right,
and that happens. But you know what though? As much as you hate those, as much as people will, those are affordable places for some people to live.
Right.
Growing up, early in my high school years, like my parents got divorced. My dad moved out. I moved out with him, and we moved into a trailer park.
Right.
In that trailer park, first off, if you've never lived in a trailer park, it can be an amazing place. Like there's a whole variety of we can talk about diversity and lifestyle and stuff. But you had everything from people who had lived there for decades,
right,
to people who were in some kind of transition in life, to people who were just moving out of their parents' house, and it was a very affordable thing. Like, I mean, I could use my piece of property. Like, it would be beautiful if I could, using the same density. Yeah. If I could put 8 trailers on there, now the neighbors wouldn't be happy, right? Because everybody wants to argue about a trailer park. I could put those on. I could probably put them on there for what, $60,000 and there could be affordable housing there. But yeah, I actually had that conversation with somebody that works at Clayton Homes, that's there on 29. Yeah. Because I had a client that was looking for one. And he's like, if you can find, he's like, I could fill it up. He's like, I could fill up a trailer park with people owning the trailer and he's like, I could fill it up in 3 months. Yeah. I don't know why, but I have an inkling. Like, I just think people think there's a stigma to it. But you can... rich people trying to decide what affordable housing should be. Right. And affordable housing is not a $500,000 townhome. No. It's not even a $300,000 townhome. I remember when I got out of high school, I was looking at houses. Like, all I could afford at that point was like $175,000. Yeah. Was what I could afford. I can't even buy a house right now for that. No, oh my God, no. Well, and it's the same, again, it's the same thing. Like, you have people who are trying to do the right thing. Like, I was not trying to build, I wasn't trying to build slums, right? Like, I wasn't trying to build, I was trying to build, and other people have done this. I was trying to build good, safe, nice, moderately priced houses.
Right.
And everybody, there's a, you always hear the term missing middle, right? Like, everybody focuses, all the county rules and city rules, so it doesn't sound like I'm just blaming the county. They're all focused on, like, affordable housing, which is, depending on what program you're doing, 80% of the median income, 40%, it depends on what program you're talking about. We also need to find houses for people who make, like, the median income.
Right.
And right now, there's all this push about trying to make houses for lower income.
Right.
And everything, market value is being pushed really expensive. Where is that person who wants to be able to, that can and wants to be able to buy a $250,000 house?
Yeah.
It's been a few years ago now. Up in Ruckersville, Ryan Holmes built a neighborhood.
Yeah.
I think they were selling, when they opened up that, I think they were selling like 6 to 8 houses a day. They sold out that entire neighborhood in a matter of a few weeks because it was smaller houses. They limited the upgrades they could do, and they were affordable houses.
Right.
And people were just fighting over them. And you can't tell me Ryan Holmes thought that was a bad business model.
Right.
I mean, most of these builders, if you could tell them, hey, you can sell and build and be done with a 100-house neighborhood in a year.
Right. They'll be like, and my margin's going to be a little bit smaller, but I can do that, and I have 300 buyers lined up.
We're going to be done.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's where there's this, like, stigma to where, I said at the beginning, we try to avoid politics, right? But in politics, people like to have boogeymen.
Right.
And when it comes to when a topic of affordable housing comes up, the boogeymen are the greedy developers and the greedy builders and the greedy landlords and most of the people that I talk to that are in that, they're not.
Right.
They're not those people. Like, if you've ever met Frank Bailoff with Southern Development, the nicest freaking guy you could ever meet.
Right.
Like, I don't get any kind of inkling from him. Now, he's a businessman. He's a fantastic businessman.
Right.
Southern Development is a fantastic company. I don't ever get the inkling that he's just, like, at it for the money.
Yeah.
Right? He wants to build good homes, and he popped in my head because Southern Development just did, like, a Realtor update and was talking about, like, their neighborhoods coming in. One of the neighborhoods they were talking about, they've been working on that neighborhood for 14 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, how much money has already been spent?
And it's an expensive game.
Yeah.
The dirt, the development in the dirt is really expensive. People don't understand. Why don't they just move some dirt? No. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars. Not only that, the engineering. It's to get there. And that's the thing that people don't understand is, like, when they now sell those lots, either as them being the builder or they sell it to another builder, they have to absorb all that cost from the last however many years. Yeah.
And it's got to be added in there.
Yeah.
And people, I don't think, see that. You hear so many people talking about, like, oh, we don't want to have housing there because of the views, or, oh, it's going to be too dense. It's going to be all that. And it's all people who already own houses.
Yeah.
That are always the ones that, the whole not in my backyard kind of NIMBY people.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. I wish people would bring those groups in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was talking to one of the board of supervisors. Like, how many times have you ever sat down and, like, talked to a developer
Right.
about this trouble? And it's amazing how many times the answer is no.
And they just come up. I feel like they just sit back there and go, oh, what else can we do to make this nice? We want to make our county nicer.
Nicer.
And
And nice costs money.
yeah.
Like, you're like why? I mean, some of this sounds stupid, but it adds up. Like, why does my 8-unit thing? Why does it need to have sidewalks on both sides of the street?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like, it sounds stupid. Like, well, it's only 8 townhomes. It's not a cross through road
Right.
Like, why does it need sidewalk? Why does there need to be a tree in front of it? Like, some of these things that people, they don't think about, but they add. They just add that little bit more. And you start tacking on these things that add $1,000 more to the house, $2,000, $3,000, all of a sudden the house is $20,000 more.
Well, then you got to get into, and I know this is kind of taken a turn and gone more into development and
Then we can
costs
go
and
back.
everything.
Let's go back to something else.
Well, I wanted to say then, like, where do people get these jobs? And then, so, like, I'm passionate about this kind of stuff too, because I'm always asking these questions, because business creates jobs. Jobs creates, us being able to go out and purchase these properties and do that. So, in today's economy, like, where are most of your buyers at right now? What professions are they having, or that you see?
So I still obviously, I built my business a lot originally on like relocation,
right.
Military relocation, university relocation, stuff like that. So a lot of them coming in are obviously connected to the university. They're connected to the military. It's amazing to me how many people are now coming to Charlottesville because they can work virtually.
Yeah.
And they're working for a company in New York, DC, wherever. And,
right.
And they're settling in Charlottesville because of all the reasons we like Charlottesville. So we get a lot of those. We also get a lot of where one spouse is doing that, and then the other spouse is getting a job here locally.
Right.
Also, obviously, retirees. We get that.
Is that mostly from like upstate, like New York, north, or where are they retiring
right
from?
now, I have a few different retiree buyers that I'm working with. A couple of them moved here from north from Florida, or we're coming down. I don't know if you used this term when you were doing real estate. Have you ever heard the term of a halfback? So what is a really common thing that happens here? Is it clear?
Yeah.
It's people from like New York, the Northeast, who move south, usually to Florida.
Right.
And then they realize it's too hot, it's too flat, it's too far away.
Right.
So they move halfway back, and they settle in Charlottesville. Asheville is another really popular one. So it's amazing how many times I am talking to somebody who's relocating, and they're looking at here, Asheville, Raleigh. They're kind of that whole Virginia, North Carolina area to just be a driving distance back to their family in the Northeast.
Right.
But not have the harsh winters.
Yeah.
So I work with a variety of people, and I also, luckily, a lot of my business is repeat clients. So, I have, where I've helped somebody who's a nurse, and then I've helped somebody else that's a nurse in the same office, kind of thing. So,
yeah.
But it's hard. Back to what you're originally talking about, like, it's hard to start a business here.
Well, it's hard to start a business anywhere.
Well, yeah.
But why would you say it's hard to start a business here?
A big part of it is cost of labor.
Yeah.
Right. So for a few years, I owned a retail store. We were talking about that before the show. From I'll wait for people to throw barbs at me about when I bought the store. This was in 2000. Oh my gosh, when was it? 2018, probably somewhere in that ballpark. I was able, like, the starting person was making, like, this is a high school kid. This is a person who just, like,
this isn't a career.
Was $8.50 an hour, and then the people who were working there that really kind of could do their stuff was like $10.50 an hour.
Right.
In 2 years, that went from the person knowing nothing. I was having to pay $10.50, $11 just to get them to come to come for an interview.
Right.
And I couldn't keep anybody longer without paying $15 an hour. Right. So that seems like small dollars, but when you're looking at an entire payroll going from like the average of being $10 an hour to now the average is being like 13.
Right.
Your margins are small.
Yeah.
And the other, I was having this conversation with somebody the other day. A lot of people also don't understand how much it costs a business to hire somebody for, name the number, $15 an hour is a popular slogan that people use. Like you as a employee, or let me take that so it's not the employee's fault. From a business owner standpoint, if the employee cannot return $45 to $50 of additional revenue, it's not worth having a position.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, 100%.
You take your $15 an hour, you multiply that times, 1.5 times usually to take into account payroll, taxes, workman's comp. Yeah, then you're doing training, and then no matter the greatest employee in the entire world, even myself, even the greatest employee in the entire world, still there's a certain pain to have, HR, if it's big enough, you have HR, you have all this. Well, then you have to make it worth going through all of that.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so then you go like, well, if it takes $45 to $50 an hour and you start talking about like a fast food restaurant,
right?
Like how many additional hamburgers does that person have to produce?
Well, without raising the cost. And then how that's where you see everything.
And this is another example of like, that's not a greedy business owner. That's not somebody who's trying to make thousands of dollars off the back of their employee. That's somebody who is just legitimately trying to justify hiring a position.
Right. Right. But here's the other thing. I'll play the devil's advocate on that, because you're saying, hey, the employee's good. How many of them are out there at $15 an hour that are dedicated to that work? Like when I started, it was like, I think my first job was, I think it was maybe $6.25 an hour.
$5.25 an hour was my first job.
So, and I think I was at a golf shop, not golf shop, but I was maintenance, and that's what I did for my first job at 15. And but like, how many are dedicated? How many show up? How many, like, I talk to business owners all the time, and they're like, I can't find good help. I can't find good help. I can't find good help. And I don't know if you know this. This is why I started one of my companies. And I was like, all right, all these people can't find good help. I'm going to provide them good help in the virtual side of it, actually. So I have a virtual assistant company that helps individuals. I marry, but I connect business owners with virtual assistants and connect them, and they have online and
which a lot of realtors use, and other business owners I know use virtual assistants. They add, they're a force multiplier.
Right.
That's actually an interesting thing I think people don't think about in the future, as more people are like, pushing to be able to work from home. Everybody should be able to work from home. If you can work from home and you don't ever have to go to the office, that means that somebody else can do that job that isn't living in Charlottesville. Yeah. Which isn't necessarily living in America, which isn't, so people don't realize that they're making themselves easier to outsource. Right. That could be a whole show on its own. Talking about like the dedication. I can remember having an employee one time called me on a Friday night. Hey, I need to have tomorrow off, right? I need to have tomorrow off. I'm like, well, okay. So the first step is, try to trade with somebody else. Yeah. And they're like, I trade. Nobody wants to work tomorrow. Tomorrow being Saturday, nobody wants to work tomorrow. I'm like, okay, well, what's the problem? Well, I'm in DC with some friends of mine. I don't want to come back. So this isn't somebody dealing with like a sickness or a right. This isn't something. I just don't want to show up. This is like, I don't want to show up. And I said, well, I need you to be there. Like, there's nobody else replacing me. And they're like, okay, I quit. Yeah. So they just quit, right? This is Friday night. They were working at another place. I saw them. They were working at another place on Monday. Yeah. And I don't think people need to have blind loyalty to them. But the market is the labor market's so hard. From you as an employer, you have to kind of accept stuff that you probably normally wouldn't. Right. And I'm a believer in employees need to be treated right. But then people complain about like the service they get at places, and they have employees that aren't there. I'll tell you, this is another one that I sometimes get some reactions to, but that's okay. And the truth hurts sometimes. when I owned my retail store, it was a franchise. Most of the stores throughout the country that I had friends with, their evening shift were high school students. Right? I mean, I had a job after I graduated high school.
Right.
Like it was kind of almost like a rite of passage. Because of the way our school system is, high school doesn't get out until later after everything else. So like when I went to high school, not this is the whole when I was back in my day, right? But when I went to high school and a lot of other places, high school gets out at like 3:00. It means you can be at a job at 4.
Right.
Well, here it's really hard for a high school student to make it to a job by 5. Well, my store closed at 8.
Yeah.
I couldn't use high schoolers as a labor. And if you go to a lot of places, restaurants and retail stores and small businesses and stuff, like most places you go to, high school labor is a big factor in the workforce.
Right.
And it's not here in Charlottesville.
Yeah.
And this is again where like rich people, and when I say rich, comfortable people, like the big kind of discussion is, well, the psychological studies and all that, high schoolers learn better later, going to school later and stuff. And I'm not discounting, there are people smarter than me when it comes to that subject. But what people don't understand is there are a lot of families that like, that's important to them. Like either the family legitimately needs that additional income, or the kid themselves wants to buy a car, and they're kind of robbed of that opportunity. That's a thing I think a lot of people don't notice. That's a big impact on our labor pool here in Charlottesville.
Sometimes, and this is my personal opinion, and this might piss some people off, but sometimes I think all these studies. Like studies say this, studies say that. Well, if studies say, I don't know what I know Albemarle and Charlottesville are not in the top 100 they're not even, I don't think they're in the top 200 in high schools in the state. I know Western, I think they're in the top 15.
Yeah.
But those two, Albemarle and I think Charlottesville, are not in the top 200. Now, all these studies that say kids learn later on, then show it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and again, it's a situation to where I don't blame the people for trying to make the right decision to help kids in school. Like this isn't, but you have to sometimes realize that there's circumstances that aren't perfect for everybody else. Like when I know somebody who works at a high school, and they talked about a couple of their lower income kids end up skipping the last period or even 2 periods of high school because they have to get home because their little brother and sister get off the bus because elementary school gets off at 2:30.
Right.
And there's the parents have to work. So these kids are getting off the bus. So like go back in my day. High school was the first ones that got to school. Like I got to school at 7:20, and they were the first ones that get out. Older siblings were home when their little brother and sister got off the bus. High schoolers were like all of this. Where if you talk to parents, they're fighting to find childcare after elementary. From elementary school to it's like a lot of high school kids were that branch.
Yeah.
Either because they were a sibling or they babysat in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And trying to do this like perfection, like being able to do that stuff is great when you're in an income level that you're not reliant on, the kid's not reliant on having a job. Like I had to have a job when I was in high school, not to help pay my parents' electric bill.
Right.
But like if I wanted, we were low enough income that like if I wanted a vehicle, I had to go like get a job and buy it.
Right.
If I wanted to go to the movies on Saturday, I had to use my money to do it. And people who are not in that situation discount all that.
Yeah. There's a lot to be said. I homeschool that because I like to travel. because I like to have my own schedule, because I like to do what I want to do when I want to do it and how I want to do it. When I see one, I don't want to get too political, but I just don't feel sometimes that, and this isn't against the teachers, but the whole school system. I mean, what are they teaching? We don't teach anything about money. We don't teach anything about taxes. We don't teach anything about real life stuff.
There's a lot of high schools that are starting to push in like courses to do
but
that.
We don't.
But yeah, it's not like it should be.
And what I really dislike about the whole school system too is, we pushed back in my day when I was in school. I graduated 2003. They started making the transition right then as far as taking out the vocational stuff. And then pushing everybody to go to college, go to college, go to college, go to college, get these loans. You can never default on them. You're going to be in debt for as long as you're alive. Take out $70,000. We'll give it to you. We only
You're 18 years old and you can get $100,000 worth of loans.
You're going to be a teacher with a $100,000 loan at $35,000 a year, and you're going to pay that back over the course of time. That's another story. But they started taking the vocational stuff out. Like. Kids nowadays, I don't even think I'm going to send my kids to college. Now, if they want to be a specialty, then go to college. That's where I'm kind of thinking. You can learn anything that you want out there without going to college. The vocational schools with masonry, carpentry, plumbing, those things I think need to be put more in schools and have a more influence and not be such looked down upon careers, because there's guys out there, there's girls out there. They're making a plumber's making can make $100,000 a year.
I'll give an example that it blew me away. One of the properties that I helped somebody buy had a basement rental, and so I helped them find a renter. The girl that ended up being a renter, she wasn't old enough to drink yet. She was either 19 or 20. She was moving here from Texas by herself because she had gotten a job making $50,000 a year as a welder.
I saw the girl's TikTok. I know who you're talking about.
She moved here, and I'm like, it blew my mind.
Yeah.
To be 19, 20 years old.
Yeah.
Making $50,000.
Yeah.
No debt.
Yeah.
Right. No debt. I mean, I have two daughters. Love them to death. My oldest is, they're 12 and 10, right? So, I mean, this can change 1,000 times between now. But my youngest has said, well, what if I don't want to go to college? I'm like, you got to have a plan.
Yeah.
I have no interest in sending them to college for 4 years to walk away with no plan, right? There's too many. I worked at a university when I was in the Air Force. One of my assignments was teaching ROTC. So I saw a lot of my cadets and other students. There were a lot that went to college because they were just putting off having to decide what they were going to do.
Yeah.
So they went to college because it was 13th grade, right? Yeah.
Right.
It's
right.
And
it's what we're supposed to do.
Yeah. But then I saw students, a lot of them were my cadets, that had a plan. We're coming, I'm here for 4 years, I'm getting commission, boom, I'm going, or I'm doing this. And you saw such a difference. Now, when you asked way at the beginning of the show, did I go straight into high school? I couldn't have gone to college at 18 years old.
Yeah.
I had an opportunity, I had a partial scholarship, but from a mentality standpoint, I just wasn't, I couldn't have done it.
Yeah.
And I think too many people just put off making a decision. You work a lot with the trades, obviously. I mean, the plumber I use is dying for people.
Yeah.
The HVAC guy that I use all the time, they're dying for people.
Yeah.
My electrician, last time I reached out to him, it was going to be 3 months before he could get to my house.
It's nuts.
Because they're just so swamped.
Yeah.
But I am happy that at least I feel like there used to be a stigma, right? You're not going to college. At least I think that stigma has really changed.
Yeah, because I think everybody now sees, well, I'm in debt, and what did it do for me?
Yeah.
like, wow, that was a good decision that I made, because that's what they pushed. Everybody needs to go to college. Everybody needs to get a degree.
Yeah.
Well, when everybody has a degree and everybody goes to college, it's not really worth much.
Well, and that's why, like, you were, when people are like applying for jobs and people get mad because it's like, why is this entry level job asking for a bachelor's degree?
Yeah.
And it's because for a stretch there, it really kind of was a red flag if you didn't go to college, because like everybody did. So why didn't you?
Yep.
You
So,
know?
Paul,
Thanks
for
for
coming
fly
on,
by
brother.
already. Man, we're done, huh?
yeah, thanks for coming in.
I told you we could fill up an hour.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for coming in, chatting with you about this. Guys, how's anybody find you to work with you?
You can Google Paul McArtor. That's the easiest way. I'll pop up. I'm with Avenue Realty. So phone number 434-305-0361.
Cool.
Call or text kind of thing. But yeah, I'm fairly easy to find.
All right. Well, Paul, thank you. Guys, appreciate you sharing this experience with me with Paul. Looking forward to next week. And from there, I hope you have a great week. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you.